Hey guys, welcome to AP Biology, and we are on part three of our evidence in tree thinking or tree thinking evidence. And so, on this part, we're going to look at phylogenetic trees and how to do some interpretation of these. So, when you look at this particular tree you see up here, this is our primate lineage. What's a primate? Primates have forward facing eyes, they have thumbs, opposable thumbs that can do this. Okay, we have most primates have a rotating shoulder joint. Okay, so it just allows for all sorts of interesting abilities and things of that nature, which many other organisms, quadrupeds and things like that, do not have. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. So when we start off, we see our group over here. These are everything on this chart is a primate, okay? The prosimians, a simian means monkey. These are that means before the sort of monkeys. This consists of the lemurs, the tarsiers, and bush babies. This would be considered our outgroup, the most primitive of the primates. And they have all of the characteristics that do indicate a primate: the forward facing eyes, the ability to grasp objects with the hand, and the opposable thumb, and things of that nature, plus a few others. Okay, as we move up as we go up into the various different types of primates, we move into the monkeys and apes. Okay, and they have a couple of other mostly dental adaptations and things of that nature. That's the anthropoid group. Then we move into the hominidae group, which are the apes, and apes generally lack tails. The gibbons are part of this particular group, and they're found in Southeast Asia. And then we move up into the great apes, which consist of the orangutans, the gorillas, the bonobos, chimps, and even ourselves. Okay. And then the next group up is the hominidae, which are the African apes, and these are the ones that are only found in Africa. Orangutans are found in parts of Indonesia. Okay, and unfortunately, they're under severe threat from deforestation right now, as are many of the other ape species. Um, as we can see, our closest living relative is the chimpanzees in the genus Pan, and there's actually several different major groups of chimpanzees, but the two major ones are the regular chimpanzees and the bonobos. And again, this split about 7 million years ago. Then we move up into the hominidae, which is our bipedal lineages. This is what the characteristic, the trait, the primitive derived trait that separates us from the African apes. The fact that we can walk for long distances on two hind legs, and we have various adaptations in both our backs, in our hip sockets, in our neck, in our cranial structures that allow for bipedal locomotion, which our great ape relatives do not have. There's actually quite a few different physiological adaptations, both physiological and physical adaptations that allow for bipedalism and allows for our great success as we have populated this particular planet. Okay. So again, what does an evolutionary tree represent? We use them throughout biology, and we do use them in lots of fields of modern science. Okay, tracking diseases, identifying functional parts of genes, studying ecological processes. There's lots of different things that we can use phylogenetic trees for. And they do show us a very clear pathway of how evolution has occurred across all of life. Okay, and we can zoom in or zoom out on phylogenetic trees in order to look closely or more broadly at evolutionary processes. We're going to look at how we've used this for tracking, for looking at disease with COVID-19. This is SARS-CoV-2 phylogeny. And let's look all the way on the left-hand side of the diagram. It begins in January 2020. Okay. The first sequence was published in January 2020. Actually, I think it was actually published in December. I think there's an earlier date up in here, which was the first sequence that was published. And what we're seeing is how the virus has changed. This is the first disease, viral disease that, or any disease for that matter, that we've been able to, in real time, track genetic changes and see how evolution has progressed in this particular virus. And what we see are multiple lineages and with different mutations. The science behind this is absolutely phenomenal, and it is evolution happening right in front of our eyes, and with dire consequences in many cases. Many of these lineages go extinct, just as Omicron is now becoming the dominant lineage. At first it was Delta, but Omicron, because it can transmit so much more quickly, it can reproduce at a faster rate, it can contribute more to the gene pool, if you will, and therefore it has become the dominant species. And I think this is Omicron right up here, showing the latest evolutionary. And I think Deltas might be one of these over here. I don't know this one exactly too well. So what have we done with this data? Well, it has allowed us to look at how is SARS-CoV-2 related to other types of viruses. So here's SARS-CoV. This was the original SARS that occurred in, I think, 2012. There's a couple of MERS, which is another type of SARS disease that has happened. And we're looking at divergence. These are all of those various things that we looked at. So let's look at this one, hone in a little bit. And we can see here is a bat that was sequenced with this particular lineage, and it's related to some other sequences we got from pangolins, which are other types of animals that were sold in the Wuhan market. And then we see various lineages, and this is not fine enough scale to see, but these are all different lineages. We got Sweden, we got Nepal, we got several lineages in Wuhan, Japan, and several lineages in USA, Illinois, Arizona, Texas one. These are all very, very, very closely related, and they're most closely related to bat that was found in the Yunnan province. And all of these viruses are more closely related to some viruses that were found in pangolins in Guangdong back in 2020 and 2019, also part of China. So it's very interesting what we've been able to do with this particular data set and look at evolutionary relatedness and looking at how this really plays a role in modern medicine. This is another kind of a cool diagram, which is showing how these lineages have spread out amongst the world. Here is the bat lineage from the Wuhan, from the Wuhan area, and we can see how it is related to some of these Chinese viruses, and then how these things the various Chinese phylogenies have spread via people moving around the globe and things like that, to Europe in the blue, to the USA in the dark blue, to East Asia in the orange, and to Brazil. Where's the Brazil lineage in green? Can't quite see it in there. It must be in there someplace, but it's right there. There's the Brazil lineage right there. So again, using all of this genetic data in order to track how disease has spread. COVID's been bad. It's really disrupted a lot of things, but the science is really cool behind it. Okay, so when we represent phylogenies, we'll build phylogenetic trees. This is one version of a phylogenetic tree. All of the organisms, as we learned the other day in the other lecture, that are currently alive are found on the tips of these branches. The root represents the LUCA, or the last universal common ancestor for these particular organisms. Okay, these are internal branches. This is one at the very end, is an external branch. These are nodes. Every place you see where branches diverge is a node. Remember, these branches can rotate on the node. So instead of being marsupials and humans, it could be humans and marsupials, okay, over here. Or I can even rotate it on here, and then it would be humans, marsupials, birds. It still shows the same information. It doesn't matter how they are represented, and you will see questions where they do that on purpose. They mix them around and ask you to find the odd one out, or which one's most similar to the original one, so on and so on. Okay? This represents a clade. What's a clade? A clade is our organisms and all of their common, or I should say, it's a common ancestor plus all of the organisms related to it. So if my common ancestor is down here, this would represent a clade because it has all of the organisms that are possibly that could be here. We have all the marsupials and humans and stuff. Of course, we're missing quite a few there. All right. So as I say, a clade comprises an ancestor and all of its descendants. So let's look at a few clades. Here's one clade. Okay, there's the ancestor and all of the descendants of this particular ancestor, land plants and red algae. Here's another clade showing an ancestor and all of its descendants, animals and fungi. Is this a clade? Yes or no? Take a few seconds and look at it and tell me what you think. The answer is no. Why is it no? Because it does not include all of its ancestors. Here's the ancestor, okay, but it does not include all of its descendants. In order for this to be true, we would have to include the archaea, but we're not. Okay, now this is a valid clade right here. We have this common ancestor, and this includes all of the organisms that are its descendants, the animals, the fungi, the red algae, and the land plants. Okay, so given this tree, which of the following sets of tips is not a clade? I'll give you take a few seconds, pause this video, and look at it and answer the question. And if you chose A, you are correct. Give yourself a pat on the back, and you're starting to get the hang of this. Okay? As I said earlier, it's the branching pattern, okay, that is important. Both of these are equal. Okay, so here's a common ancestor to both B and C. This is an equally valid representation. Okay, here's the common ancestor. Here's C and B. They both are equally related to each other. Okay, so they are both equal. This one is also equal. As I just changed it, I've switched it around a little bit. These are also equal. So now let's look at this one. Which of the following has a different topology? Which is the odd one out? Which one doesn't show the same relationships? Take a few seconds and look at this. And hopefully you chose C. C is not correct. Why? Because let's look at them. Here we see A and B, and then we see D, E, and C as a common ancestor. Well, here's A and B with a common ancestor. Here's D, C, and E. This is showing the same relationship as this one, as is this one. We've just rotated the nodes. Okay, we've just rotated the nodes in A and B. This one, we have D and E, but we don't include C as we see in all of these other ones. A and B is correct, but this is incorrect there. Okay? So again, branching order is all that matters. Sometimes, again, here we see a straight shot from here to here. D is equally distant from the common ancestor, as is B, as is E, as is C, and as is A. A, B, C, D, and E are all equally distant from the common ancestor here. Okay, and there's just another way of representing that particular data set. Once again, A, B, C, D, and E are all equally distant from the last common ancestor, which would be right down here. We can also represent the same tree sideways. I have a tendency to like these a little bit better. I find these to be more intuitive than these kind of slanted diagrams. But again, it's showing the same relation as this one. A and C are most closely related in terms of having most recent common ancestor, or I should say equally as B and D are, and so on and so on. Okay. And again, all of these show the same relationship. So you can see, you might see one of these phylogenetic trees in a lot of different ways, but they are all equal as far as the species relatedness goes. Okay. Which one is the, oops, I kind of hit the button twice too quickly here. So you may want to look at this one carefully and just quickly see why this one is the odd one out. Okay. Um, you should hopefully pick this up pretty quickly, why it is the odd one out there. And one of the other things we see with evolution, one of the misconceptions that we see in evolution, is that many people believe it's some sort of ladder, and we see increasing complexity as we go up this evolutionary ladder, if you will. We think it's because we've seen those pictures of fish crawling out of the water, turning into lizards, and so on and so on. But it's not progress. Okay. It's just that organisms are becoming better adapted to their environment at a particular time. And evolution sometimes goes backwards. Organisms lose traits. They lose eyes, like blind cavefish. Okay. It's not because there's no selective pressure to have eyes if you're living in an environment that's dark. And so there might be another trait like maybe hearing or sense of smell or an electrical, what do you call those things that you see on the fish? The lateral line systems become more developed that allow them to survive and reproduce at a higher rate than ones that have eyes, because eyes take energy. They cost energy to build and to maintain. So if you don't have to, they don't give you any advantage. Then there's no selective pressure to maintain those. And individuals that are born maybe with smaller or reduced eyes, but larger lateral line systems are slightly better adapted to that particular dark environment. Again, survive and reproduce at a higher rate. Okay. And I always like to say, kids think that, when they see some of these diagrams such as this, they think, oh yeah, mammals are the most recently evolved. No, mammals have been evolving all the way from the beginning of time. We are just this continuation of this long, long, long lineage. So these are all our extant, i.e. living species out here. And all these species, even though they may not have changed on the outward appearances over time, evolution has not stopped. Okay, they have evolved tremendously from their distant ancestors, as have all of the animals up here. It doesn't mean that evolution stops when we say a single line. No, it's just that evolution is continuing all the way up this whole line, and there are many, many different species coming off of here. We're just not showing those. Okay. So I always like to bring home that point that all species are equally evolved. We have a common ancestor going back to over close to 4 billion years ago. All right, so let's take a few seconds, pause the video, and see if you can answer this particular question. And if you chose E, pat yourself on the back. Okay, so relatedness between different organisms is generally equal to how long ago did you have a common ancestor? Like I say up here, you're more closely related to your first cousins than your second cousins, because your first cousins, your common ancestor were your grandparents. But with your second cousins, your common ancestors were your great grandparents. So remember, you have 4 grandparents, you got 8 great grandparents, and you got 16 great great grandparents. You got 32 great 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 grandparents. Okay, so pretty wild when you start going back that far. Okay, you are more closely related to a chimpanzee than to a worm, because our last common ancestor with chimps was about 6.5 million years ago, versus with worms, it was over 400 million years ago. Okay, and the data backs this up. Okay. Last, here's another question. Which one of these statements is correct? So pause the video, take a minute, and see if you can come up with the correct answer. And the correct answer is C. And that's it for today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it, and we shall see you in class soon. Thank you.